The hallway was always the same. Cold grey lockers lined up like soldiers. Echoes of laughter and footsteps bouncing off the walls. But not all laughter was kind. Jena walked with her head down, clutching her books tightly against her chest. She had long black hair that framed her pale face like a curtain. Her eyes never met anyone else's. She was the quiet one, the weird girl, the one who never spoke unless asked. They called her names behind her back, and sometimes to her face, freak, mute, robot. At lunch she sat alone, by the window pretending to read, but her eyes never moved across the pages. She just wanted to disappear. One day, as she walked to her locker, a group of students blocked her way. There was Maya, the leader of the group, tall with perfectly straight hair and cruel eyes, and two boys behind her laughing like hyenas. "Hey, look who it is," Maya said loudly, so everyone could hear. "Little Miss Invisible." Jena said nothing. She just tried to walk around them. But Maya pushed her books from her hands, and they scattered across the floor. Oops must have slipped. The hallway erupted with laughter. Jena knelt down quickly, gathering her things as her cheeks burned. She did not cry, not yet. She waited until she got home. In her small room, with soft pink curtains and old trophies from when she was a child, Jena curled up on her bed and cried into her pillow. She wished she could be someone else, someone strong, someone fearless. Her mother knocked gently on the door, but Jena only said she was fine. At dinner, she barely touched her food. Her father asked how school was, and she only nodded. Later that night, as she stared at the ceiling, the words kept echoing in her mind. Freak, mute, invisible. She needed an escape, a way to turn all the pain into something else. The next afternoon after school, she walked past a building she had seen many times before, but never entered. It was a small Taekwondo studio tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. She heard the sounds of feet hitting mats, loud shouting, the sharp snap of focus. She stopped and stared through the window. Inside, people were moving with strength and discipline. Young girls and boys in white uniforms bowing to their instructor. There was something about it that drew her in. The next day, she stood at the entrance for what felt like an hour before stepping inside. The receptionist looked up and smiled. "You here for a class?" Jena nodded slowly. "First time." She nodded again. "All right, take off your shoes and head to the mat. Master Lee will help you." Master Lee was a short man with sharp eyes and a calm voice. He welcomed her without judgment. He showed her how to bow, how to stand, how to breathe. At first she was clumsy, her movements awkward, but he only encouraged her. She came back the next day and the next. Taekwondo became her world, a place where she was not invisible, a place where her silence was strength, not weakness. At school, nothing changed yet. Maya still pushed her books. The boys still laughed. But Jena no longer cried at night. She trained in the evening, her body becoming stronger, her spirit harder to break. She began to feel a fire deep inside, and she promised herself one thing. One day, she would make them see her. One day they would remember her name, not as the freak, but as something greater. Weeks turned into months. Jena continued training in silence, but with purpose. Every afternoon, she bowed to the mat and to Master Lee. Her kicks became sharper, her punches stronger, her breath more controlled. She was still quiet, still kept to herself, but inside she felt something shift. Her hands used to tremble when someone looked at her. Now they were steady, like the calm before a storm. One day after training, Master Lee called her aside. He looked at her with those deep, focused eyes. "Jena, you have progressed well. Would you like to try sparring next week?" She looked up surprised. Sparring meant fighting in front of others. It meant facing someone eye to eye. She hesitated, then nodded. The following week, she stood on the mat across from a girl named Alina. Alina was taller and more experienced. Jena could feel the eyes of the class watching her, waiting to see if she would break. Fight the fear. Master Lee said, not the opponent. When the match began, Jena almost froze. Alina came in fast, but Jena remembered to move her feet to breathe to keep her guard up. She dodged a kick and returned a light tap to Alina's side. She heard someone clap in the background. Something inside her lit up. By the end of the round, she was sweating, her heart racing. But she had not backed down. She had fought. After class, Alina approached her smiling. "You're fast, Jena. Where did you learn to move like that?" Jena smiled slightly but said nothing. That night, for the first time in years, she stood in front of the mirror and saw not a shadow but a fighter. The bruises on her arms were not shameful. They were badges of progress. At school, things were still the same. Maya passed by and whispered "loser" under her breath. But Jena no longer flinched. She no longer curled up inside her own mind. One afternoon during gym class, they were told to pair up for a self-defense drill. Maya smirked and grabbed Jena as her partner. "Let's see if the mute girl can even lift her arms." The coach told them to simulate a simple escape move. Maya went first, barely following the steps. When it was Jena's turn, Maya tried to overpower her, grabbing her wrist roughly. Jena moved without thinking. A swift twist and pivot, and suddenly Maya was on the floor. The class went silent. The coach raised an eyebrow. "Very well executed, Jena." Jena stepped back, breathing calmly while Maya stared up in shock. After class, Maya stormed off without a word. That evening, Jena walked home, and the sky felt different. Lighter, like she had taken a brick off her chest. She kept training harder than ever. Master Lee approached her again, one day after class. "Jena, there is a regional competition next month. Would you like to represent the studio?" She blinked, stunned. It would be her first time competing in front of strangers, in an official match. But the fire inside her did not hesitate. "Yes," she said. It was the first time she had spoken more than one word in the studio. Master Lee smiled and nodded. "Good. You are ready." The day of the regional competition arrived with clouds hanging low in the sky. Jena stood in the locker room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She wore a crisp white uniform, with a blue belt tied tightly around her waist. Her hands trembled, but not with fear. It was anticipation. Her name was called over the loudspeaker. She walked toward the arena, hearing the sounds of the crowd and the echo of feet on the mat. The gym was filled with athletes, spectators, and judges. Her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. She bowed to her opponent, a girl named Livia, with sharp eyes and long arms. They took their positions and waited for the referee to signal the start. "Begin." Jena moved carefully at first, testing her timing, watching Livia's feet. Livia struck first a fast side kick. Jena stepped back just in time and returned a counter kick to the ribs. 1 point blue. The scoreboard lit up and Jena blinked. She had scored first. The crowd murmured. Livia came in again, more aggressive, but Jena was focused. She blocked another kick, twisted her body, and landed a clean hit to the chest guard. 2 points blue. Jena felt something rise inside her, something warm and fierce. The match continued, with shouts of encouragement and claps echoing around the room. In the final seconds, Livia lunged. Jena ducked, low spun, and swept her leg just enough to destabilize her opponent. Time. The whistle blew, and the match ended. Winner blue. Jena stood in place, breathing heavily, as the referee raised her arm. Applause filled her ears. She had won. Master Lee met her off the mat with a calm nod of approval. "Well done," he said. "You stayed focused." She smiled a little breathless. It felt like the air had shifted around her. Back at school, she still walked the same halls. But now something was different. One morning, a boy in her math class tapped her shoulder. "Hey, I saw you at the tournament on YouTube. You were amazing." Jena blinked surprised and nodded softly. More students began to whisper when she passed. "Is that the girl from the match?" "Yeah, I think her name is Jena." Maya noticed it too. Her eyes followed Jena more than before. One afternoon, Maya stepped in front of her by the lockers again. I heard you think you're a fighter now. Jena looked at her calm and silent. Maya scoffed and walked away, but her voice was less sure than before. That weekend, Jena trained harder than ever. Her punches echoed through the studio like thunder. Master Lee noticed and approached her. You have something burning inside you, Jena. Not many can turn pain into strength. She looked at him, eyes sharp and filled with quiet determination. I want to go further. I want to fight at the nationals. He nodded slowly. Then we begin a new phase of training. Get ready. It will not be easy. She did not flinch. I am ready. From that day on, her training doubled. Mornings before school and evenings after. Her body ached. Her muscles screamed. But she never missed a day. The fire inside her kept growing. This was not just about Taekwondo. It was about reclaiming the voice that had been ignored, the strength that had been buried, the worth that had been mocked. And she was not stopping now. Every morning before the sun rose, Jena tied her hair back and stepped onto the cold floor of the studio. The air was still, the lights dim, but her mind was already awake. Master Lee greeted her with a silent nod, and they began. Her kicks had to be faster, her balance sharper, her stamina longer. He pushed her limits every session, forcing her to break past what she thought possible. One morning after a brutal drill, she collapsed to the mat, gasping for air. Her hands shook, her legs refused to move. She stared at the ceiling, sweat dripping into her eyes. Her body said, stop, but her heart whispered louder, keep going. She got back up. Master Lee watched silently, then said one thing, this is where champions are made. That night at home, she sat at the dinner table in silence, as her parents spoke about work and errands. They rarely asked about her anymore. They had learned she would not speak unless something mattered. She wanted to tell them about the competition. She wanted to say that something had changed inside her. But instead, she ate quietly and washed her dishes as always. In her room, she stared at the wall covered with sticky notes. Each one held a small goal. Better timing. Faster turn. No fear at the center of them. Always one big note. National champion. The day of the national competition was getting closer. At school, the whispers had grown louder. Some students started smiling at her in the halls. A few even asked her to join their group projects. She still preferred solitude, but she no longer felt small in the silence. Even Maya had grown quieter. One afternoon during lunch, Maya sat at the same table across from Jena without asking. She tapped her nails against the plastic tray and looked over. You really think you can win? Jena met her eyes calmly. She did not answer. Maya laughed and shook her head before walking away, but her voice had no venom left. The fear was gone. Jena had faced worse. She had faced herself. 2 weeks before the national competition, Master Lee gathered the students. You will each train in pairs. From now on, he said. Real matches are won in the mind, not just the body. Jena was paired with a boy named Kai. He was taller, stronger, and had already placed in the top 3 last year. At first, he was impatient. You have speed, but no aggression. You have strength, but you hold it back. She said nothing. She just trained harder. By the end of the week, she had knocked him off balance more than once. He began to nod after each spar. Not bad, he said one day, catching his breath. You don't talk much, do you? She shrugged. He laughed. That means yes. He began to respect her, and in return, she began to believe in herself more. Late at night after practice, Jena walked past the empty school building. The windows reflected her shadow as she passed, a quiet reminder of who she used to be, a girl who walked with her head down. Now her steps were steady, and every reflection she passed was a reminder of who she had become, not a shadow, but a flame. The stadium was enormous. Rows of seats stretched to the ceiling with banners of every competing team hanging above the mat. Jena stood at the edge of the arena, her heart beating like a drum. She wore a white uniform, lined with the national patch. freshly ironed and glowing under the lights. Her name had been called. It was time. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. As she stepped onto the mat, everything else disappeared, except the voice of Master Lee in her memory. Breathe. Focus. Trust your training. Her first opponent was a girl named Natalia from the West region, known for her speed and unpredictable kicks. They bowed and took their stances. Fight. Natalia moved quickly, launching a spinning kick that brushed Jena's shoulder. Jena reacted without thinking, ducking low and delivering a sharp counter to the ribs. 1 point blue. Natalia tried again, but Jena was calm and centered. She blocked, then struck back with precision. By the end of the match, Natalia was breathing hard, and Jena stood tall. Winner blue. As she left the mat, she caught the eyes of her teammates, cheering from the stands. Even Kai stood and clapped. The second match was harder. Her opponent was aggressive with a strong back leg kick that came out of nowhere. Jena had to adapt quickly, using footwork and timing to stay just out of reach. Midway through the round, they clashed, and Jena stumbled slightly. She heard the crowd gasp, but she steadied herself, regained her balance, and returned a clean strike to the chest. The buzzer sounded and the scoreboard flashed. Winner blue. She advanced to the semi-finals. That night in the hotel, she sat on the balcony staring out at the city lights. The air was cold, but her blood was warm. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who sat alone in the cafeteria, pretending to read, the one who cried in her room, while the world ignored her pain. Now she was here, not by luck, but by will. The next morning, she met Master Lee in the warm-up area. He handed her water and looked at her with calm eyes. You are not the same girl who walked into my studio months ago. You have become something stronger. She nodded, not needing to speak. The semi-final match was fierce. Her opponent was taller and clearly experienced. They exchanged blows that echoed through the arena. For a moment, Jena doubted. Her leg ached, her side burned. But then she remembered why she was here. Not for medals, not for applause, but for the little girl who had once been pushed to the ground and said nothing. For the girl who had swallowed her tears and stayed silent. She let out a breath and moved. Strike after strike landed with precision and fire. Time. Winner blue. The crowd erupted. Jena stood in the center of the mat, her chest rising and falling like waves. She was going to the final. Her hands trembled as she left the arena. But this time it was not fear. It was purpose. It was pride. The final match was scheduled for sunset. The arena lights cast a golden glow across the floor, and the crowd grew larger every minute. Jena paced slowly behind the curtain, her heart pounding like a war drum. She wore her headgear chest protector and gloves. Every breath she took reminded her of how far she had come. From the shadows of school hallways to the brightest spotlight in the nation. Her opponent was Renata, the reigning champion. Fast, deadly, and known for her explosive first rounds. The announcer called their names and the crowd roared. Jena walked out into the light. Her eyes focused ahead. No fear, only fire. They bowed to each other, then faced forward as the referee raised his hand. Begin. Renata struck first with a spinning kick that almost caught Jena by surprise. Jena shifted back blocked and stepped to the side. She responded with a sharp side kick that grazed Renata's guard. No point. Renata came again, this time harder. But Jena did not panic. She remembered her training, the thousands of kicks. The silent mornings, the sweat and tears. She breathed and moved with precision. Renata launched a back kick, but Jena ducked and countered with a clean hit to the chest. 1 point blue. The crowd responded with shock. The champion had been scored on. Jena stayed calm, her eyes scanning Renata's movement. They circled each other, exchanging points. The scoreboard flashed 2-2, then 3-3. With 20 seconds left, the match was tied. The air was electric. The stadium filled with shouting and tension. Renata lunged in for a final blow. Jena anticipated it turned swiftly and delivered a powerful turning. Kick right to the midsection. The contact was clean and echoed through the hall. 2 points blue. 5 seconds remained. Renata scrambled, but Jena kept her distance, moving with grace and control. The buzzer screamed, time. The referee stepped forward and raised Jena's arm. Winner blue. For a second there was silence. Then the arena exploded in applause. Jena stood there stunned. She had done it. She had beaten the champion. She had won the national title. Tears welled in her eyes. But she did not let them fall. She bowed deeply and left the mat with her head held high. In the locker room, she sat quietly as others celebrated around her. Kai rushed in, breathless and grinning. That was insane. You just destroyed Renata. She smiled softly. Thank you. Master Lee walked in slowly and placed a hand on her shoulder. You have become everything you dreamed of. Now the world knows who you are. Jena nodded, unable to speak. Later that evening, she received her gold medal on stage, under thousands of flashing lights. Reporters tried to ask her questions, but she only gave short, honest answers. I trained, I fought. I believed. No long speeches, no grand celebration. Just quiet power. Back in her hotel room, she sat on the bed, staring at the medal in her hands. It was cold, heavy, and beautiful. But what warmed her most was the fire inside that had never stopped burning. And it was only the beginning. The school hallways felt smaller now. Jena walked through them like a shadow of her former self. But this time, the silence around her was not fear. It was respect. She no longer kept her head down. People looked at her differently. Some students nodded when she passed. Others stared in disbelief, whispering to their friends, "That is her, the national champion." She sat alone at lunch, like always. But now the isolation felt peaceful, not painful. No one dared to mock her. They had seen her fly through the air, delivering strikes that echoed across the nation. Even the teachers began to treat her with subtle admiration. One day in history class, Mr. Keene asked her to stay after everyone left. He smiled gently and handed her a magazine. Her photo was on the cover. "You made us proud, Jena." She looked down at the glossy image of herself, mid-kick, face filled with focus. "Thank you," she whispered. After school, Maya waited for her at the gate. She stood there awkwardly, arms crossed, eyes shifting. "Hey," she said. Jena paused. "I saw the match. You were good." Jena raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Maya looked uncomfortable, as if the words tasted bitter. "Look, I was mean to you, I know that. I guess I do not know. You were always so quiet, and I did not understand you." Jena remained still. For a second, it looked like Maya might cry. "Anyway, I just wanted to say sorry." She turned to leave but paused again. "You are stronger than any of us ever knew." Jena watched her walk away, feeling something unexpected. Not anger, not revenge, but release. She had already won. Later that evening at the Taekwondo studio, the students greeted her with admiration. Some asked for advice. Others simply wanted to train beside her. Master Lee had placed her championship photo above the front desk. Champion! But Jena knew her journey was far from over. One evening while practicing alone, she saw a girl standing at the entrance, watching nervously. She had glasses too big for her face, and her hands fidgeted with her sleeves. Jena walked over and smiled gently. "First time." The girl nodded. "My name is Lily. People at school are..." She stopped mid-sentence, but her eyes said everything. Jena placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come, let me show you where to begin." They stepped onto the mat together as the room filled with the quiet sound of breathing and determination. Jena moved slowly, guiding her through the basics with patience. Lily watched carefully, trying to mimic every movement. That night, Jena looked around the studio and realized something. She had once come here broken. Now she was a light for others. The fire inside her no longer burned just for herself. It burned for every girl who had been mocked for being quiet, for every child who had been pushed aside for not fitting in. And in that fire, she had found not just strength, but purpose. Weeks passed, and Jena continued training harder than ever. Though she had already earned the national title, her hunger did not fade. She started waking up earlier, adding running and strength exercises to her daily routine. Her body became leaner, her movements cleaner, her eyes sharper. One afternoon, Master Lee approached her after class with a letter in hand. It bore the logo of the International Taekwondo Federation. He held it out without saying a word. Jena opened it slowly and read the words, "You have been selected to represent your country at the World Taekwondo Championship." She stared at the letter for several seconds, unable to breathe. The world! She was going to compete against the best fighters from every corner of the planet. She looked up at Master Lee and saw pride in his calm eyes. "You have earned this, but now you must train like never before." Her world changed overnight. She was placed in an elite training center where athletes from every sport trained with discipline that felt unreal. Every morning began at 5 sharp. She sparred with champions, lifted weights until her arms went numb and practiced. Footwork until her soles bled. There were days she collapsed on her mat soaked in sweat, unable to stand. But she always got back up. No longer for revenge. Now she fought for greatness. For the quiet ones watching her from the shadows. For the younger Jena, who once cried alone. She began journaling each day after training, writing short messages to herself. "I am not small. Pain is not the end. Silence can be powerful." The other athletes respected her, though she rarely spoke. Her actions did the talking. One evening, after a brutal training circuit, she sat beside a girl from Brazil named Sophia. Sophia was loud, cheerful, full of energy. She nudged Jena and said, "You are always so serious. What is your story?" Jena thought for a moment, then replied softly, "I was invisible once. Now I fight so no one else has to be." Sophia nodded and smiled. "That is a good reason." On the day of the opening ceremony, Jena stood with her teammates in a sea of athletes from all over the world. Flags waved, music played, lights shimmered like stars. The stadium held thousands, but Jena stood still, like a mountain rooted in silence and strength. Her parents watched from the stands for the first time. Her father had tears in his eyes. Her mother clutched the rail tightly, unable to look away. They had missed her journey, but now they saw what she had become. She bowed to the audience as her name echoed across the speakers, representing her country in the lightweight category. Jena Lin. The crowd cheered, but she barely heard it. Her focus was already on the match, on the challenge ahead, on the purpose that carried her from the shadows into the spotlight. This was not just a competition. It was a transformation. And Jena was ready. The lights in the arena were blinding. The noise of the international crowd thundered through the stadium. Announcers spoke in multiple languages. Cameras followed every step. Jena stood on the mat, hands clenched, eyes focused. Her opponent from South Korea was tall, lightning fast, with a record few could touch. But Jena had not come this far to be afraid. She bowed to the referee, then to her opponent. They stepped back into position and waited for the signal. Begin. The match exploded with speed. Her opponent came at her with a flurry of kicks that sliced through the air like blades. Jena dodged one, blocked another, countered with a clean strike to the side. The scoreboard blinked. 1 point blue. The crowd responded with gasps and shouts. She had scored first. The pressure grew with every second. Each movement had to be perfect. Each breath timed with precision. They danced across the mat like wind and fire, crashing and retreating. Midway through the match, her opponent landed a spinning heel kick. Jena fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through her ribs. The referee stepped in. "Are you all right?" Jena stood slowly, eyes burning with determination. "I am not done." She raised her fists and nodded. The match resumed. She adjusted her stance, watched the patterns. She began to see the rhythm of the fight. Every kick had a setup, every step a purpose. She used her silence not as a weakness, but as a weapon. She let the noise fade, let the crowd disappear, and then she struck a perfect roundhouse kick, straight to the chest. 3 points blue. Her opponent stumbled, surprised by the sudden shift. Seconds ticked down. 10, 9, 8. The Korean fighter charged forward with one last desperate strike. Jena ducked, twisted, and landed her final hit. The buzzer screamed, "Time." The world stood still. The referee stepped forward and raised her arm. Winner blue. The stadium erupted. Jena stood frozen, sweat dripping down her neck, her chest heaving. She had done it. She had beaten the world champion. She dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by the moment. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with sweat and relief. The crowd rose to their feet. Jena Lin, world Taekwondo champion. As she stood on the podium, the gold medal placed around her neck, she closed her eyes and breathed in the roar of the crowd. She thought of the cafeteria table where she once sat alone, of the books pushed from her hands, of the nights she cried in silence. And now here she was, not just seen, but remembered. Her flag rose behind her, her anthem played, and somewhere in the stands, a little girl held her parent's hand, watching with wide eyes. Jena smiled, knowing what that little girl saw. Not a fighter, but proof that strength can grow in silence, and that even the quietest soul can shake the world. The world knew her name now, Jena Lin, not just a champion, a symbol, a story whispered among young girls who felt invisible, a hope carried by children who sat alone at lunch and wondered if anyone would ever understand them. But Jena never let the fame change her. She returned home quietly without parade, without flashing lights. She walked the same streets that once felt like cages, now feeling like open roads. When she stepped into her old school for a guest visit, students stared in awe. Some reached for their phones to take photos. Others whispered in disbelief. She walked into the auditorium where she had been invited to speak, not because she wanted to, but because she knew someone in that room needed to hear her voice. She stood at the front of the stage, under the bright lights, looking at the rows of young faces. Most expected her to deliver a speech with loud declarations, but she simply began. I was not always strong. I was quiet, ignored, mocked. Her voice was calm, steady. People thought silence meant weakness, but silence taught me to listen, to feel, to understand. And in that silence, I built something no one could see. She paused and looked across the room. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to believe that your voice matters, even if no one hears it yet. When she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly hands began to clap, and then the entire auditorium stood and cheered. Jena bowed her head, not out of pride but gratitude. Later that day, she visited the Taekwondo studio where it all began. The mat was still there. The smell of sweat and discipline still lingered in the air. Master Lee stood waiting, his arms crossed, a small smile on his face. You look different, he said. Stronger. But I see the same fire in your eyes. She bowed deeply and smiled. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. He nodded. The world sees you now. But I always did. As she left the studio, she found Lily, the quiet girl she once trained with, practicing alone. Jena stepped onto the mat and stood beside her. You ready for nationals? Lily nodded, nervous but determined. Jena helped her adjust her stance, corrected her breathing. You are stronger than you think. Lily smiled. Like you? Jena looked at her and replied softly. No, like you? That night, Jena walked home under the stars. She passed her old school, her old path, and finally stopped in front of the window where she used to sit alone. She looked at her reflection, no longer the girl with hunched shoulders and broken eyes, but a warrior carved from silence. The world would keep spinning. Challenges would come again, but she knew now, No matter what came next, she had already won the battle that mattered most, the one inside herself.